I need to heal. I need to build that self-trust and confidence. The culture of this whole situation has made me stop loving something I've loved my whole life, and the price tag is no longer worth it to me.
This is UNSILENT, a speak series from NoStigmas that champions mental health advocacy and challenges the stigmas that prevent people from getting the help they need. I'm Eli Lawson, a producer for the show. This week, NoStigmas Lance Bordelon will be having a conversation with Lindsay, a former actress turned doula. We'll hear about sexual harassment in the workplace and the damaging effects of having your body image tied to your value. But we'll also see how impactful it is to find your support and lean into the changes that will better your mental health. Thank you for being here. If you want to learn more or contact us, visit nostigmas.org. Don't face it alone. Be unsilent. This episode contains mentions of sexual harassment and abuse. While there's nothing explicit, it could be triggering for some. It's okay if you need to skip this one. Do what's right for you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, so my name is Lindsay Moore. I am a doula and a communication specialist. What I'd really love to dive into with you today is talking about ways that we can sort of harness traumatic or difficult things that have happened to us and really turn into like pain with a purpose. Like, what do you do with it? We can't obviously control when bad things do happen, but I believe, really can control what we choose to do with it after the fact. I think something I feel really strongly about in my family, everyone loves the saying, it builds character. If something bad happens to you, like, oh, it builds character. For me, I'm like, if you decide to run a 10K and training is difficult, like that builds character. If something truly traumatic has happened to you, that in and of itself, I don't think that's the thing that builds character. I think how you choose to heal and move forward from it is the thing that builds the character.
So what was something that comes to the surface whenever we talk about this pain to purpose? Like, what was a trigger or something that came up for you in your life or your career?
The way that I kind of see the path with it for me is that first I got into the arts as a way to help heal from undiagnosed mental health issues and substance use issues, codependent patterns that were happening in my family of origin from the time I was really, really young. And I think I got into the arts at a really young age as a way to sort of maybe escape at first, but then to start also kind of like processing and having an outlet for these really big emotions that didn't have a place at home. And so that looked like, acting, modeling, dance, music, like all of these things, just as a way to kind of find an outlet for those. And that was incredibly helpful. And I think really helped me get through some really difficult years when I was younger. That has a dark side, especially as you get older as a little girl. And I think from a very young age, I was lucky to have some really, really positive and supportive mentors, but that's just an industry in which you are really commodified by your body. Even if it's not sexually when you're a kid, it's still like, watch your weight, don't change your hair without asking your agent, like all of these things that just really sink into you at a young age. And you start to learn that your value is tied to what you look like. And as you get older, that starts becoming more and more explicitly sexual. And I think, kind of combined with stuff that was going on with my family and in my personal life, it ended up all getting really messy. And I think I started like seeking out relationships that were really destructive and damaging, abusive in some situations. As I got older, I ended up becoming married to somebody that, struggled with substance use and became physically abusive. And it's hard not to see the direct correlation around that. There are a few experiences that I had in LA that I think really directly contributed. The biggest for me really was I was working, listen, I'm the first to say I was super lucky. I moved to LA and I started working pretty shortly after I moved on a network TV show. It was awesome. It was a huge set. I loved the people that I worked with. And, it was good money. It was fun to like go onto like this fancy studio lot and feel like you were like a real actor. It was like, It's exciting. And I think I was a little bit unprepared, honestly. At first, it was a lot of fun. And, as it's probably similar to like being on tour or something like that. You do spend all of your time with these people. You don't see your family or your partner or your dog or whatever. Like, this becomes your family. And it's just so almost like in a summer camp way, but darker, like
but darker.
but darker. from the top down. I mean, we had an EP who liked to sort of like rule by fear. You know, he would come into a set of hundreds of people and just start screaming at people. It did not matter if you were an extra, a production assistant, if you were one of the lead actors, like it didn't matter. He had no problem like just screaming and berating people for any little thing. And that really created this culture of a lot of fear and a lot of certainly abusive language, of disrespect, of not treating people like humans. You know, and so when you're also isolated just with that group of people for a long period of time, and you don't really have a chance to get home and process and normalize that and say, oh my gosh, this thing like happened at work today. I don't really know what to make of that. Like there isn't that opportunity. You just go home, sleep, and come back and you're right back in it. But I think when at the highest level, you know, people on the production, the writing, the directing teams feel that they don't need to treat everybody there like they're the same level of human. It's okay to use threats and fear. If you don't like the way that something's going, it's really natural that ends up becoming sexual harassment, you know? And so, and I certainly was not the only person on set that experienced this, but there was one particular member of the writing and production team who got really aggressive with it. And you know, it's hard to explain it without getting into like really explicit details, but I think I can safely say like I was a doctor at an ER in LA, which is how he had gotten pulled onto the show, and had no qualms, like kind of coming in and being really overly touchy-feely at first and sort of just like sharing like little anecdotes or like showing a photo. I mean, talk about violation of like HIPAA laws, right? Of like, oh, you know, I was at the ER and this guy came in with this thing that had happened during sex and whatever. And it's like, at first you're like, is this a funny story? Are you trying to test me in some way? Like, what is this? But also there's such, as you know, in theater and in film, there's such a power dynamic and such a hierarchy.
Just going to say, it sounded like he was there was definitely a power dynamic.
Oh yeah. And it was made really clear early on also that like anybody is replaceable. You start to feel really worthless. You start to feel like, oh, well, is my acting or, you know, is my work actually good and valuable? Or do you have an agenda? Are you trying to sleep with me? What is this? If I say no, you know, I have to be so careful to protect egos and feelings, or else my job could literally, like my livelihood could be at stake. It really eroded that sense of, can I even trust my own judgment? And that's actually the thing that makes me the angriest when I think about that. It was, I think, at that point that I decided I need to make a change here. This isn't working for me. You know, I need to heal. I need to build that self-trust and confidence. The culture of this whole situation has made me stop loving something I've loved my whole life, you know, and the price tag is no longer worth it to me. You can't tell because you can only see my face right now, but I'm about 7 months pregnant, and it's been a really interesting journey to kind of heal and unlearn some of those residual things around like your body and understanding the feeling of powerlessness and not having agency over your own body and not being able to make decisions for yourself as in an acting capacity, right? Like being judged and commodified like that all the time. Now all of a sudden my body's doing things like I have no control over. And it's actually really, really wonderful, but it's still hard to sort of release those old scripts. So that's just to say that I think the idea that my body was just something that was of value to other people, like sexuality was something that was like seen as an asset more so than who I was as a person, right? That was something that I just accepted at face value and literally did not know that there was another way. For me, the break of saying like, the price tag is too high for this. I need to make a change. That's why, because I started to realize like, I don't know what the other thing is, but there has to be something that's not this, like a lifetime of fighting so hard to try to find a sense of self-confidence and worth and value in who I am as a person. I mean, my mental health was in shambles, just struggling so hard with anxiety, depression, you know, panic attacks, some like PTSD stuff from sexual assaults that had happened when I was younger. Like there was so much, and I felt so unprepared to deal with it, you know, and I did have a therapist, and I was not as diligent as I should have been, I think, with keeping up with a lot of those tools.
If you or someone you know is experiencing a crisis, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org for support via live chat. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, please call 911. Other resources are linked in the show notes.
I didn't know what the other thing was. I just knew it had to be something better than that.
Right.
And
okay, so we're 2017. That's where your head is. What happens next? Like,
yep.
where did you take yourself?
So I'm unemployed.
Vacation.
Yeah. So baked a lot of bread. I was feeling this strong pull to say, listen, I'm a huge believer that art does help heal. Art does connect us. Art is a service that we can provide. Like, our creativity is a gift that we can give. So there is no part of me that does not still believe that. And I was looking for a more tangible, more direct way to help other people, because I felt this inside me that, like, when I was hurting so badly, something that would really help is feeling like I could help other people. Completely random, very woo-woo, but like, I had this dream and I woke up in the morning and said, I know what I want to do. I want to be a doula. I had never attended a birth before. I had not been pregnant. I had no experience with this whatsoever. But I just said, I just know, I just had this dream and this is what I meant to do. And I know, like I said, I know it sounds a little bit out there, but for me, like, the conviction was so strong.
Yeah. I mean, who's the question? Yeah.
I ended up moving back to Chicago, where I'd gone to undergrad. And I had some kind of community. I ended up finding a job that turned into a permanent job. I did my doula training. I started working with women and families. I started volunteering with with a local hospice and sitting with people as they were passing. And I was just finding so much joy and purpose in being able to help people in that way, in sort of a tangible one-to-one way, as opposed to like the sort of like greater community healing that I think can come from art in some capacity. And I did find ways to still create things. I had a lot of friends in the film industry, so I was able to partner up and produce like a film about gun violence in schools. That was really meaningful as well. So I think, like, trying to find ways to channel that into, how can I use this less about, like, it's not going to look the way I thought it was going to look, but how can I still use these skills? How can I use skills like empathy, resilience, being able to stay up all night, things that really hone working in film, and use them in different ways and repurpose them. And to be honest with you, I think that's something like I'm still working through in a lot of ways. I think another way that can look is peer support. I think that's something that I really love about NoStigmas, is the ability to share your story. I mean, by nature, I'm a private person. Like, even sharing this level of detail feels a little bit vulnerable and scary for me. But what I found is that the more I can talk about difficult things that have happened, whether it's an abusive relationship, a sexual assault, family of origin trauma, stuff that happened that I've, described here, like sexual harassment or problems at work, things, whatever it is, what I've discovered is when I am able to disclose in a way that feels safe, with the right person, that, I feel like there's trust there and all of those parameters that make sharing safe. When I'm able to share, I have always been met with such kindness, and I have felt so much peace after it. And I think, like, also what makes me sad, but also I think builds so much wonderful connection, is the number of times I've heard "me too" from other people, from girlfriends, from coworkers, from whatever. When you are able to open up and share and make that first leap, the number of times I've heard, "Oh my God, that happened to me too," or "Oh my God, I've been there, I know." Like, that's actually the thing that gets me the most. And that's the thing that galvanizes me the most to want to make things better for other people, and want to make things better for, like, the younger version of myself. It's like, yeah.
What would you, I guess, what would you say, just kind of going in that direction, what would you say to people who, maybe are listening, who aren't from a film background, or maybe who work in an office or work in other situations? Like, what advice would you give to them? I
think the biggest thing that helped me, it wasn't the move. I don't even know that if it was like really changing jobs. I think it was starting to rebuild the self-trust to say, like, my value is not tied to what other people think of me, how other people treat me, or what the work that I do actually is. Like that is not my worth as a human. That is not what makes me valuable and worthy of love and belonging. For me, it was finding a therapist that I really connected with, that was really supportive, that believed me unfailingly, didn't try to problem solve. I think through a lot of that work, I was able to get to a place where I, was able to meet my now husband, who is also incredibly supportive and did all the same things and believed in me, even when I was struggling to believe in myself. So I would say, finding your support people, finding your community that can build you up when you're having those moments of self-doubt and struggling the most. It doesn't have to be a partner. It can be anybody. But I think just finding that key person that can really be your ally and say, hey, I've got your back. I know you're having a tough day. Here's what I'm going to believe in you until you can do it for yourself. That I think was really, really helpful in healing. And I think sharing your story in safe ways, like identifying the people that you do trust enough to be honest with. Hopefully they're able to hold that gently for you and support you as you share what you need to share.
What maybe micro moments were happening that you can say, wow, okay, that was a pattern. That was something that I kept doing, that you could maybe turn a corner, or maybe you could have prevented some pain along the way. Like if you looked back, is there anything that you see, or are you kind of like, I did the best I could in the moment. I survived it.
I mean, listen, for me, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of saying like, I think I did some things that, like, I don't feel great about, or that I regret, or I wish I'd handled things so differently.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important to say, those coping mechanisms, the way that I handled that, like, that's not the way I would have handled it now, but I did do the best that I could with the tools that I had at a time, and having the self-compassion to kind of like release. There's a lot of I wishes.
Yeah.
And I think trying to have compassion for the younger version of myself and just say, hey, you did the best that you could, and it's okay because it got you here now. Like, I think certainly in the past, I was independent to a fault. And I think that actually is a thing that I would want to change, is that I was so convinced, like, I'm strong. I can take this. I can handle this on my own. There was a lot of, I think, shame masquerading as pride, of saying like, I didn't want to tell people what was going on. I could handle it. I was fine. And I actually wish that I had let more people in. I wish that I had developed some level of trust in others and trust in myself earlier on, to let people in, because I think there were probably people in my life that like would have wanted to support and help. And I didn't share what was happening. And I wish that I had reached out earlier and felt safer to be more vulnerable, I think, earlier on. I think, particularly, growing up, I think, it might not have been in all the places that kids typically look for it, but I think that there still were people in my life that could have provided the support that I was looking for at that time, and maybe started to build up some of those skills that when I was having difficult experiences as an adult, I feel like perhaps I might have been better equipped then to deal with them at that point. But I think that's something where it's like, just because it didn't happen before or when you were younger, to your point, if there are people that are experiencing that right now, that's really the best advice I think I would have, or my best suggestion is to, really just try to identify people with whom you can share, and find resources to support you, because like, you probably are you are strong enough to do it by yourself. You can, it's not a competency thing. It's that you don't deserve that. You don't deserve to have to go something difficult alone. Something else that my husband and I talk a lot about is wanting to make sure that when we praise our kid, that we're not focusing on like, appearance or achievement. So rather than saying like, oh my gosh, you're so handsome, or oh my gosh, you're so pretty, say things like, oh, wow, that was really brave, or that was really kind the way you did that, or that's such a creative idea that you had. Like, trying to help them understand that their value comes from who they are and the skills that they build, and their character, and really trying to emphasize that early on, so that later on, if somebody does say, oh my gosh, you're such a beautiful little girl, we can turn to them and say, honey, like, that's true, you are. And that's not the most special thing about you. That's a mutable thing, but your bravery, your kindness, your creativity, your compassion, all of your curiosity, like, those are the things, like, those aren't going to change and leave you as you get older. Like, those are things that are part of you. People might judge me. I don't know. Maybe they're too polite to say it, but maybe they do. Maybe there's like there's so many perceptions that I can't control, which I hate. But you know, I look around, I'm like, I love my life now. And this would never have been possible if I was just railroading myself into making the same unhealthy choices. It wasn't going anywhere good. It didn't matter what happened in my career. It didn't matter how successful I might have looked to other people or not.
Right.
I was so unhappy and my health was really suffering for that.
What if someone's paralyzed and doesn't feel like they can push past that shame? What advice would you give them?
A tool that was really helpful for me was, and it can be yourself or somebody else, but I think like imagining that you're talking to like a little kid. So either like the younger version of you or just like a kid in your life that like you really love and care about. Like, would you look at a 3-year-old and say like, you know, you're too old, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you don't deserve love, you know, like you would never probably like you would never. No. But for me, that was a really, really helpful tool to imagine, like when I started becoming really aware of those thoughts and feelings that were keeping me feeling stuck and feeling paralyzed, I would imagine like, would I say those same things to, you know, for some people, I think a tool is like, would you say that to a friend? Would you say that to someone you love? For me, it was like, I needed to go a little bit deeper and be like, would I say that to like my niece?
Exactly.
I would say, oh my God, you're so perfect the way that you are. And you can do this. And, you know, and I think like finding those ways to change the self-talk, sometimes it can be helpful to externalize and say like, would I say that to somebody that I love? Would I say that to the younger version of myself? And when I started to realize, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was talking to the 6-year-old version of myself, like I'd give that girl a fucking hug. Why are we not worthy of saying it to ourselves? Why are we not worthy of that same love and care? Just in such a basic way, saying I need to, even if you can't make the change right now, because I've been there too, right? Maybe today you can't walk out of your job today, but can you start to think about, how do I make a plan to exit that situation? How do I make a plan for how to leave that relationship? It's okay if today is not the day that you can take the action, but today is the day that you can start thinking of, what are the steps I'd like to take? And I think just even those small micro steps start to build that sense of self-trust to say, oh, I can do this. I do know how I would do it.
This is UNSILENT. Thank you for listening. Today's episode was hosted by Lance Bordelone and produced by me, Eli Lawson, Lance, John Panicucci, and the rest of the incredible NoStigmas marketing team. Special thanks to Lindsay for sharing her story this week and courageously diving in to vulnerable places. To go beyond the show, connect with us on social media or visit nostigmas.org to learn more about mental health topics. Please leave us a 5-star review and share with others wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. New episodes of UNSILENT come out every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Finally, remember that whatever you're going through, you don't have to do it alone. Be UNSILENT. We'll see you next week.